obviously the cigarette thing is a bit of nostalgia. It's a bit of, say, like, something
Yeah.
tactile, something retro, something that is like analog, quote unquote, in a way. But like the reason why I say like vaping is so bad, not necessarily in general with young people, but like the reason why people have really bad vaping issues is that, like, unlike a cigarette, it doesn't disappear. Like a cigarette, like when it's done, it's done. You got to go out and get it. It's the same with, like, if I wanted a certain mix tape, literally, like I had to go to Amoeba Records and buy it. Versus
Yeah.
like an Apple Music, I can get whatever I want whenever I want. So like the vape
Yeah.
is just like a never ending, and obviously it does end, but like you cannot self regulate. Versus a cigarette is like, well, it's done, bye, and like you're really able to do that. And I think that is like fascinating, the sort of technological element of that I've not thought about, and
Yeah.
like that's clearly a key to all of
I mean,
this.
All right. Hip replacement, episode number 15. Kyle, I'm on vacation. This has been a trial so far. Why don't you tell us how we've gotten here so far?
So a few things have happened. I mean, first off, we're both in the same country. We're technically miles apart, even though we've not met in person.
Oh,
But we
that's right.
will,
You're yeah, you're
hypothetically.
back home. You're back home in Barcelona, right?
Yes, back in Barcelona. But we had some technical difficulties, so anybody in Spain listening, Wi-Fi is great sometimes, Wi-Fi is not. So we had a false start yesterday, and today we figured it out, and here we are. Ben has Wi-Fi at a cafe because no Wi-Fi at home.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, get ready for a fun ride because I'll probably be dropping in and out throughout the whole thing.
Stay
But
strong.
Kyle, we're joined by thank you. We're joined by Nia Robinson, who is in the Wi-Fi stable city of Chicago, city of
yeah.
big shoulders. Kyle, how did we find ourselves here on the pod with Nia today?
Okay, so Nia is, first off, Nia technical background. Nia is a social media manager of the Chicago Sky, the WNBA
Oh, cool.
team, which is very cool in and of itself. But what I think is arguably cooler is Nia and I are good friends. We go way back. We used to work at an agency together. Nia in the, I guess, technically strategy world, and I in the copy world. We had a lot of overlap, and we became sort of friends in there and outside of there. Nia's done a lot of cool work. Nia's very smart. And Nia's here with us now. Thank you
Hey.
for joining us, Nia.
Nice. I mean, Nia, this is we're getting into real WNBA season, right? Because the NBA finals were what two? I can't even. I'm not even keeping track of time anymore. Was it last night or 2 nights ago that
Sunday,
the
right?
Thunder won? Sunday night, Thunder won.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, what? Okay, so does that mean it's your season now? It's NBA WNBA season?
Well, all of the above, because the way it kind of works, and I'm going into my first full season because I started about a year ago. And so
Okay.
February is free agency, and that's when it's really busy, and you never know when there's going to be a trade. You never know when you're going to have to announce the trade, and that's a lot. And then we had, and maybe my order's off, we also had the expansion draft, and that's when we had a new team, and they were able to take a player from each team pretty much before the actual draft, where we pulled players from college. And then
Wow.
the season started. I believe our first game was May 16th or something like that. I can't remember specifically, but we've been playing games. We even just had our in-season Commissioners Cup. And now All-Star Weekend's coming up. I believe AmeriCup is also coming up when we take a break because we have players who are going overseas to play in a different
Sure.
tournament. So
Oh my
it's in
God.
full swing. There's a lot.
So, well, and what I meant too is that especially given all of the controversy around the heavy fouling and the officiating with Caitlin
Hmm.
Clark last week, like
Mhm.
the WNBA and also the low ratings of the NBA Finals, notwithstanding Game 7, the WNBA really feels like it is starting to occupy. Well, parity probably is still a few years off, but something close to it in terms of the zeitgeist and pop culture. Is that something you're feeling as well?
Oh, for sure. I think if you look at the last 2 years specifically, and I would say it almost felt kind of night and day, and that's what a lot of people who've been in the league for a while. Obviously, it was bubbling up, and more people were watching. Like when I lived in New
Yeah,
York,
yeah.
I had season tickets to the Liberty, but there is something different, especially with sponsors and partnerships who want to
Hmm.
work with us. Looking at people who if I'm walking down the street and I have my, team gear on, they literally ask me, one person asked me how they can try out for the team, which I had to break it to them. That's not how it works.
I love
But
that.
people are really interested, and I think a lot of it comes really good things in terms of more money, more eyes, more opportunity, more jobs for people who want to work in the industry, and then also the weird things in terms of how people act in different sports leagues fandoms, and kind of bringing some of that negativity over. And I think a lot of people see women's sports
Mm.
as this utopia where everyone's happy and we're holding hands and we have cakes that we bake together, but that's not necessarily true. And I think it's kind of a rude awakening for some people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I was going to
I
say,
was
I feel
just
like a lot of that sort of reflects sort of to Ben's point, like this sort of growing pain in a way that like the league is already there, but also catching up to sort of the things that say like, to the point of needing quote unquote better uh, officials, whatever, is like that sort of speaks to like, it isn't quaint anymore, and like to the point that someone can walk up to you and be like, can I audition for the team or try out, whatever you call it.
Exactly.
That is
Yeah,
like not, there are so many more tiers because it is actually a real thing, and now it's finally stepping into that moment, which is amazing.
exactly.
well,
And I think,
sorry, Nia, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think people forget that these are professionals. And
Right.
it's not just, of course, you have people like Angel Reese, for example, who is building her
Hmm.
whole empire across industries. But at the end of the day, like she's a professional basketball player.
Yeah.
That's a job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's intriguing. In fact, I think that the way that the WNBA has rapidly accelerated over the last few years is indicative of a couple of different things. One is how savvy these young players are with social media. So I'd imagine you have a lot of
Hmm.
interaction with them, but also the economic disparity or the income inequality between the NBA and the WNBA means that WNBA players have to be so much more enterprising in
Mm.
terms of how else they round out their sort of economic ecosystems. So yeah, I imagine you're going to see a lot of really interesting entrepreneurialism. I was saying, Nia, and I'm going to do my best to not get anybody in trouble, but I spent a little time with the CMO of the WNBA in Cannes last week, guy Phil Cook, who's an old friend, and it was really interesting to see the way he was channeling all of this new energy around women's sports. The story of Cannes Lions, in a lot of respects, was around Sport Beach, the big Stagwell ecosystem that they've built, and then all of the ways that all of the athletes trickled out into other parties and other moments throughout the festival. So it really feels like there's incredible energy there, partially because it's the one live environment through broadcast
Yeah.
media that still is like tune in and isn't on demand. And on the other
Hmm.
hand, just because athletes have become brands in and of themselves and are,
Mhm.
extending in that fashion. Is that a, I mean, do you feel like you're at on the launch pad of a rocket ship? Because it feels like you could be.
Oh, for sure. And I think in so many different ways, just the opportunity itself. I- and I think, and this is like kind of a tangent, kind of not. There was someone who I was like kind of seeing, kind of dating, who basically said, my friends tell me that I probably shouldn't date you and I should date a civilian. And I said, I am a civilian. Are you kidding me? Like, I am a normal, regular person. But they said, by virtue of my job and that being very front facing, I'm
Mm.
kind of like in between some things. Obviously, I'm not the CMO, I'm not the commissioner, I'm not an owner or the coach who are actually like big front. See, he finished the beer. Um,
Yes.
um, big front office, like front facing people. But it's very clear that, I'm walking around a national broadcast arena right now, broadcasted arena. And so
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm on a rocket ship, and it's really great. It's really nerve wracking, but it's also great to see that there's so much opportunity in front of me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that I was going to say is like talking about the Angel Reese not situation, but Angel Reese is sort of like a public figure now, and sort of like even Caitlin Clark and sort of everybody in that world. Like it's, I don't think it's surprising. Surprising is maybe the wrong word, but it's so interesting to me that I feel like that's sort of their rise, and sort of like the rise of, say, the, what do you call it, the entering into the arena fashion, what is that called, like it's like
Oh, the walk-ins, yeah.
the walk-in, like the walk-in culture and like WNBA culture like hitting at the same time, somewhat
Yeah.
simultaneously. Like I was going to say, like that to me has been so interesting because I think they really sort of go hand in hand. Not that like that wouldn't exist or be as successful for, say, the men and fashion people without the WNBA or vice versa. But like that's it's sort of like they hit at the WNBA's sort of like re-rise, if you'll call it that, hit at the time when, say, like fashion brands were getting to sports, and fashion brands were also like, well, how can we market to women in sports? Here you go. And so like it's definitely, yes, I'm assuming feeling like the middle of a rocket ship for not only the league, but just like for culture, because like it's
Yeah.
at the intersection of so many different things,
Yep.
from gender to fashion to politics to myriad different things. It's like it's
Oh, of
very
course.
interesting. Oh, how much of that do you like actually feel that weight of, if at all, outside of, say, like someone you were dating?
Yeah.
Like I'm assuming when you're
I
at the
mean,
game, it's game time.
yeah, like I feel the weight of all of it, right? Like when we look
Right.
at new from a fashion perspective, we have Coach who is really big right now on getting into the intersection. Like they're doing a lot of work with women's sports and the WNBA
Right.
specifically.
Right.
I think another thing too that I see a lot, data science is I would say one of the new frontiers in sports overall, but it's cool to see how it's interacting with women's sports in the science and the physics around why these athletes are hitting the shots and taking the shots that they are, taking. I think that's another thing that
Wow.
people, and I know I was talking with a student who's interested in data science and sports, and I said, you're kind of coming in at the perfect time. Like, get
Right.
with the program, get with it right now because it's about to take off. And I think I feel a lot of it, especially in a political sense, because I talk to my boss about this all the time where people will say, why can't we just talk about basketball or why can't we just talk about the sports? But
Right.
all of these things, Kamala was right. We exist in the context of everything and whatever she said.
Yeah.
No, but actually, if I have to have an uptick in how much I'm monitoring or moderating the comments, especially when we
Right.
have kind of dicey games and things like that, there are things that are happening on social media that are directly related to people's politics. And so I think it's a really fine line between how can we, do our job to keep us rooted in the fact that, we kind of just want to talk about the sports and the sports only, but
Hmm.
also realize that I have to be aware of everything that's happening in the world.
Totally.
Yeah, just to understand. So,
You're
yeah.
walking into, like, social media is like walking into the mall. Like you can't just be like talking about sports when everybody at the mall is talking about XYZ subject, because like that's just how it is. And like it's funny is maybe the wrong word, but like it's so interesting this year that like
Yeah.
I know obviously like you know this, and a lot of people do know this, and obviously Colin Kaepernick a few years ago was really ringing this alarm really hard. Is that like pol- uh, sports and politics go hand in hand no matter what you think, and like I feel like we
Yeah.
really saw that this year of like we're not going to the White House even though we won the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Sports teams, ironically, I don't know what to make of this. I don't think it's ironic, but like oddly are like the brands that showed probably the most for pride this year, which is a bit shocking and like
Yep.
impressive. And
Yep.
like also these players sort of showing up and speaking out against things like ICE and deportations, things like that, which is remarkable. You would not expect that, but again, we wouldn't be here without, say, Colin Kaepernick and all these things as well. But like it also like is in the same world of like we are talking about WNBA. There's a lot of, say, women's rights issues that Trump at all are sort of like fighting against. Like this is sort of like
Yep.
it's inherently political because it gets at disparities, gets at all these things. So
Yeah, and I think it helps me do my job better when I can
yeah,
understand that because there are certain things that I would and would not say based off what's happening. Like I
absolutely.
think especially, let's say we win, and obviously we can have a little fun with it. We can poke little jokes and things like that. But if the team that we're up against, let's say, is involved in a lawsuit or some sort of like dispute that's actually like serious and it's under
Right.
investigation, I'm not going to make the jokes that I normally would want to make, mainly because that is we're winning in poor spirit, right? And I think
Right.
that's part of it.
Right.
I think there was another time where we were going up against a team who had, I believe it was a lawsuit or something that was related to like parenthood and motherhood and just kind of when you go on maternity leave, kind of like in that realm.
Hmm.
And we had to wait to post one of our partners, which is directly related to like the lactation pods, mainly because like would it have been the end of the world? Probably not. But again, you want to be considerate and you want to understand that there's just a courtesy and I think just a little bit of understanding in how we do certain things. I feel like when people think social media, for example, they think, oh, we just send you things and you kind of post it. And I have to tell
Right.
people that no, right? Like it's my job to know the pulse of what's happening across a lot of different channels, whether that be political, social, and I'm not trying to set anybody up for failure. It's not going to be
Right.
my fault, so I rather take caution.
Right. No, that's smart.
Yeah,
That's why you're good at your
yeah,
job.
yeah. Thank you. They pay me the big bucks.
Yeah.
Well, you know who they don't pay the big bucks to is the Wi-Fi provider here.
Spanish
The
Wi-Fi is
the
really doing you dirty.
I'm saying, man, I'm saying. So yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like one of the things that you just touched on a second ago that I think is, you know, not a vector that I necessarily think of when I think of marketing or social media as a prerequisite. But the more and more I think about it, the more and more I feel, you know, people in roles like yours talk, the more I feel like it's necessary. Is the importance of humor, or at the very least, the
Yeah,
ability to cut through by making a joke that is of the moment as a way into whatever point you're trying to make. Um, I, I don't know how much to what extent do you feel like that is a prerequisite, or too much, or to and to what extent do you get trained in the idea of like funny takes as your opening as a way to make a point.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm trained. I think it's one of those things where you either have it or you don't. To
Just
be completely
naturally hilarious.
Totally.
Yes, I am. No, I'm just joking. It's I did inherit it, but I think to make that be able to make that professional and have those jokes land, I really do feel like one, it's a lot of trial and error, and I think it's also a lot of it takes a lot of time to get there. Have you all seen the White Sox? Their social channels. They're the
No,
one
or
of the Chicago baseball teams. They
probably,
have
but
a
no.
horrible track record,
Of
right?
course.
Like I can get you on the diamond for $1. Like that is they're not good. But they are the way that they like I'm serious, and I love all of my fellow colleagues who work there, but they are really funny and they handle their record really well. Like there was one where they lost. I can't remember the score, but they lost, and they posted well, their first tweet was, the final score of this game can be found at www.whitesox.com or something like that. And because you're supposed to share the final score, but they're like, just go to the website. We're not sharing it. And then they also posted a screen recording of them going on their desktop, and it said memes if we win, like memes if we lose. Like it's just like the way that they just like play with it. It's really funny, and it's more of a cultural moment, and I think a moment in their history than it is, wow, my favorite team keeps losing. At least you can make people laugh. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing
Well,
about oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say. I mean, this is the zone in which the Savannah Bananas exist. It was I mean, I don't follow MLB particularly, but I
Hmm.
did recall that Jason Stewart from How Long Gone is throwing out the opening pitch at a White Sox game in a couple of weeks.
Huh.
Like, and when he talked about that on the podcast, I was like, Jason's a friend, and it's like, wait, why would you get invited to throw out an opening pitch? Like, you've never talked about baseball on this podcast ever.
Yeah.
And it's for the meme, right? It's for the meme.
No,
For the
exactly. And
clout.
I think if you're not going to win, you at least have to put on a really good show. And if you're not going to put on a good show, you better have a really good giveaway item that I would like to wear. Like it has to be cute. And if you're not going
Right.
to do that, hopefully you're doing all these things, right? But if you're not going to do that, the least you can do is make me laugh. Right? So
Yeah.
it's entertainment at the end of the day.
Well, the thing I was just going to say is that like the language of the internet, which I think a lot of people, unless you work in it or do a lot of trafficking in it, you don't really understand that like the internet is a language, and the language is sort of like one part entertaining and one part like, rage baiting. And like that's how you sort of
Yeah.
like when you stay in the middle of that, like you're on top. And it's literally like how someone like Donald Trump is who he is. Like he's able to straddle that. As much as I hate him and as unfortunate that is, he's mastered that. Few people have that mastered, and like that's sort of like where the really good brands, really good stars online really thrive, is that like they're able to straddle both being entertaining and
Yeah.
sort of like getting people going, whether it's actually to enrage them or not, but like it does that sort of like job.
Yep.
I have two points. One is there's an article in the FT, the Financial Times, over the weekend by Simon Cooper, who's one of their regular columnists, about how Trump exists on a fourth vector of time scale. Like there's a philosopher whose name I wouldn't be able to tell you right now, but he says time exists in three main vectors. One is historical time, in other words, objective time. One is cultural time, in other words, the time in which we experience epochs and eras as cultures, right? Like the culture of
Hmm.
greater Christianity is different than the timeline of greater Islam, for instance. Um, and then the third one, of course, is personal time, right? The experience that we all have individually in our own sense of the timeline. But he's like, Trump has invented a fourth one, which is essentially the entertainment timeline. And the entertainment timeline is a mix of all of those because it is taking historical events, it is taking cultural memes, and it is taking personal attention span and inventing this sort of like always on, like irrepressible statement for the statement's sake kind of thing. And I'm radically reducing Simon Cooper's point here, but it was interesting to think like, okay, in an entertainment driven ecosystem, we're not just playing with messaging or marketing, we're playing with perception of time, perception of reality. And that's why he has succeeded in ways that no one before him ever has, and hopefully no one ever after him ever will. But that's a whole different
I was
discussion.
like, unfortunately, I feel like
Um,
everybody after him has to be that way. I don't think there's any way
well,
to turn that back. To a certain
to
degree, yes,
to a
okay, to a
certain
certain degree.
degree.
But
The the second thing though that I and Nia touched on a second ago is the other thing that I wanted to use as a transition point was the idea of creating, if you can't win, be entertaining. If you can't be entertaining, make great swag. Now, I want to be very careful not to say that the benefactor of this point is not entertaining or is not winning, but I did want to use it swag as a way to get into the can line discussion because that was something we promised to talk about. And also, as you can see here, those of you watching the pod on YouTube or Spotify, I got a Cosmopolitan hat here it is monogrammed with my newsletter.
Oh, cool.
this is wild.
Um, so I think because of where I am in my career, I see anything that I have not gone to as a
Hmm.
worthy opportunity of my Google search and my research to see if it's worth the money. And I know I almost had an opportunity to go. We did before I'd left, when we had joined Now Monks, they did some competition, some pitch,
Oh,
I don't know,
right.
something like that. Yeah. And so I do care in the sense where I'm curious, like, is this something that I should try to get myself to? Or is it something that isn't worth my time? I don't know.
Right. I think it's well to me I've never really been interested in it. It feels like a lot of interesting people getting together and high-fiving and like that sounds beautiful for them, but like I'm not sure that I need to do that because I get enough of that in the world in general.
Yeah.
However, I do think it was interesting. I was this year I was in London when it was happening and like literally everybody I met with was like, "Why are you here? You should be there." Like everybody was like, need to be there and you need to be talking to people. Like you need to be doing a
Yeah.
talk and like blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I do." So like that was like a really interesting thing is that like it even if it is something where say you are not necessarily interested or not in say advertising marketing in the traditional sense of being in an agency or whatever like I think in a way Can Lion is sort of like the top of the pyramid when it comes to the meeting of the minds of media people. And like that's sort of what I was getting from everybody in London was that it was like, you know, obviously they were happy to see me there, but a lot of them were like, you know, you need to do that because that would be really great for your career. And I was like, oh, you're right. I'll have to do that next year. But that
Yeah.
was like fascinating to me, that sort of the placement of it, which I don't think is something that really myself included is thought about outside of the like, you know, this is where the agency people go and like high five and see who gets the award and then they leave. Because like again, to the point of to Nia's point is like when you're in an agency and people talk about it, it's so like my eyes roll so far back that like I'm staring at like my spine. Because like I know that the executives are just gonna go and like get fucking drunk and like profit off of a team they don't talk to and they who they incredibly underpays work and like take credit for it when they did nothing. And it's like I know that from being in that space. Um,
I mean,
so
I think my question, a question like to both of you, I think, because something else I think about is mentor and how I've
right,
had a lot of jobs, I've come across a lot of people, and I can count on one hand how many people that I'm interested in learning from across all
right,
of those experiences. And I kind of feel like in if I go to Cam, right? Like if I go there, if I go to South by Southwest, if I go to the like African American Film Festival, all of these industry events, it's worth my time and money if I run into people who are actually genuine in being part of an industry, not necessarily like,
Right.
like fine, if that's what you want to do, you earned it, go ahead. But I think one thing that I'm looking for are hubs and spaces, whether it be virtual or in person, where I can go and say, wow, I just elevated whatever I have going on
Right.
just by being there. And I feel like that's hard to come by.
Totally. Well, I was going to say Cosmo probably is a company or media company that sort of like is not necessarily buying for younger people, but like I'm assuming they more so than an agency can see the writing on the wall and can adapt, which is surprising given that's a magazine. Because like I think the thing that sort of like resonated or struck me is something that I've felt from being in agency spaces, and again being in London and being even here, is you feel this feeling from people of like the agencies are going down. Like there's like that model is really disappearing for reasons that they sort of like to your point that the whole AI thing is that they sort of like they sold themselves out, and now they some of them sold themselves out and they don't know how to recover from it in some ways. And to that point, to your point of like, that gulf between the old and the young gets it to what you were saying, Nia, is that like wanting that sort of mentorship and that sort of cross collaboration, be it between different types of creatives, different types of backgrounds, different ages, different whatever. And like that is really sort of crucial, again, to the point of this podcast, like crucial for survival in life. But I think that's so crucial in work as well. And that feeling of like the older people say, or the executives or the bosses are not talking to the younger people is felt so pronounced within agencies right now, because like they don't cross the line. They don't care to, they don't, be it because they're too deep in a hole of like, we need to get out of a financial mess, or because they just like, they've always been profiteering off of underpaying young talent. Doesn't matter. It's the same result, because like now it is like, it sounds like they're being caught sort of pants down in a situation where it's like, well, you're here representing this company, but where are the creatives who made this? Where are the young people who are sort of like being pulled up to sort of like follow in your footsteps? If they're not there and it's just sort of creators, and like you're sort of like writing your death certificate because you're sort of saying that like, I'm about to be irrelevant. I'm not sort of like fostering and developing my industry. And that's happening for real on the ground now within agencies. I hear it from people all the time, and it's just like that it's their fault. And to that point, I'm sort of curious, Ben and even Nia as well, is that like, do you think part of that onus of switching this situation is on, say, I think it would probably be more Gen X, probably some millennials as well, maybe even boomers, to sort of like make that, to start investing internally, because like that is the solve. But like that cutting it out really, I think, did a lot of long-term harm.
I mean, I think something that I think about, especially you said, a lot of the younger people there were influencers. I saw a video that said, I don't want to be an influencer because I want to have a large following. I want to be an influencer because then I get opportunity, right?
Right.
Like if the people who are actually,
Totally.
and I'm not saying influencers are not talented. That is not what I'm trying to suggest at
No.
all, especially the ones who do their own editing and their own this and their own that. They're where they are because of that. But when you think about a lot of people who truly are talented and deserve to be there, they're probably not going to get there. They're probably not going to have a brand or anybody else, because
Mm-hmm.
when you think about why you're bringing these young people in the first place, it's supposed to make it seem cool, to make people like me who are not influencers want to spend money to go there, And so that is something I think about. I'm like, should I just be an influencer? Is that like the key to opportunity, the key to mentorship, the key to having adults around me not waste my time? Because that's kind of what it seems like right now. And when we talk about, the future, and I think one of the articles you sent me, Kyle, about how everything is a remix or a reference,
Mm-hmm.
I, have a lot of questions around who's actually making the decisions.
Right.
Like who's making the decisions? And if you don't have, and I love intergenerational, this has been my jam since I was in college. I love it so much. But something that I've realized more and more and more is how unrealistic that actually is. Because even, in my current role, and I've talked to actually many people across all the jobs I've had, I hear more about your experience when it's time for you to tell me my idea is really bad, not when it's time to be proactive. saying,
Wow.
"Hey, I'm taking you under my wing," and but at the
And
same
I'm
time, I don't think it's gonna go ahead, Kyle. I don't think it doesn't benefit anyone or the
right.
people at the top to change that, I guess.
But I think exactly to that sort of relationship is like how you to that relationship and sort of like how working life is now, especially for young creatives. The fact that like you're not getting that mentorship and or like there's not an investment in young people is why then you turn and there is no credit given either internally or externally. Like that is then why it's like, well, fuck this. I'm going to start my own Substack or TikTok or whatever. And then you essentially are becoming your own agency. And like, because yes, a lot of these people can have brand deals. A lot of people are going to get paid directly for a brand to do a campaign that's totally internal purposes only. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a sort of funny thing to your point of what you observed at Cannes, Ben, is that like, that sort of lack of looking down and helping out and lifting people up is exactly what is sort of like going to say really or has already really kneecapped the agency world because like young people are then becoming their own agencies and like they are starting their own agencies because they were able to create a platform and like they're working around you because you didn't help them out. Like that is fascinating to me and like that's just an economic circumstance. It goes beyond agencies, but that's it.
So there are two parts of the question, or two parts of the answer. One part of it is I have friends who'll say, I get a birthday cigarette or a celebratory cigarette, or like, I'm feeling
Right.
European. And yeah, me
Yeah.
personally, like I don't smoke. I've never had a cigarette before, and so I can't relate. And my friends also don't they smoke if they do smoke tobacco, it's probably with weed. So that's the one part of it where it's like as a treat, I will have a cigarette. But then when
Right.
you bring up the conversation of vaping, which is objectively worse for you, it is terrible for you.
Right.
That is a different. I see so many people from different classes. It doesn't matter race, it doesn't matter where you're from, they are vaping has a chokehold on young people, and it's really really sad to see. And a lot of people, they know it's bad, but it's addictive. Like it's addicting. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an addictive substance. And so it's not necessarily that it's cool. I think it's more so that we lost the war against tobacco products
Well,
again.
I was gonna say is that like it's so fascinating that like I've not had this. I'm sure someone's talked about this, sure someone's written about this, but I've not had this realization or sort of thought that like obviously the cigarette thing is a bit of nostalgia. It's a bit of say like, something
Yeah.
tactile, something retro, something that is like analog, quote unquote, in a way. But like the reason why I say like vaping is so bad, not necessarily in general with young people, but like the reason why people have really bad vaping issues is that like unlike a cigarette, it doesn't disappear. Like a cigarette, like when it's done, it's done. You got to go out and get it. It's the same with like, if I wanted a certain mix tape, literally, like I had to go to Amoeba Records and buy it. Versus
Yeah.
like an Apple Music, I can get whatever I want whenever I want. So like the vape
Yeah.
is just like a never ending, and obviously it does end, but like you cannot self regulate. Versus cigarette is like, well, it's done, bye, and like you're really able to do that. And I think that is like fascinating, the sort of technological element of that I've not thought about, and
Yeah.
like that's clearly a key to all of
I mean,
this.
it doesn't help that it doesn't smell. I mean, I personally I
Right.
do not blow blueberry smoke in my
No, no,
face
no, no, no.
personally. Like, but it doesn't
Awful.
smell in the way that cigarettes do. And it's also like once you blow it, it goes off into the ether and it doesn't again stick around like smoke does. And then I think the other thing that doesn't help is they look cool and fun. Like if you
Yeah.
can play Tetris on your vape, or there are vapes that look like highlighters and they're being targeted towards this newer generation. I do think it's unfortunate. I hope they start to crack down because you have really, really young people dealing with severe health effects like popcorn lungs and just
Yeah.
other respiratory issues that could have been avoided. But we're living in a time where we just don't really have the tools to deal with what's going on. And so I'm not surprised that people are choosing a vape for their oral fixation. So,
I mean, maybe this is just getting at like maybe big tobacco will have a comeback. And like cuz like look, what was worse, vaping or smoking? To the point of like the article and them quoting like Lord and Addison Rae and like materialist and all these things like I don't think that's real. I don't think that's it's hard for me to say that in Europe where like in Spain where people are fucking they smoke all the fucking time. France less so surprisingly. London not a lot
yeah.
of people, but more than the United States which I know they're not smoking as much. So like it seems like it's more, to me, seeing that story and this quote unquote phenomena is like it is more to that point of nostalgia. It's that point of like I'm being real and like I'm being authentic versus like
Yeah.
I have this like USB that I'm putting in my mouth. Like that's sort of like what it's in conversation with. But then it also is oh, there's something else I was gonna say about that. That also just escaped me. But yeah, it's about being retro and real. Oh, that was the other thing. Is that like it's just being in your 20s too. It's about like, I had a probably like a 3 or 4 years where I was a smoker. Like I was probably had like a cigarette or two a day for like 3 years. And that was a unique 20 something thing. Like
Yeah.
everybody I know who also was smoking, they don't smoke anymore because like we all
Yeah.
just did it because we were in our 20s. And that could be a very millennial hipster thing,
Very
but I think
fair.
that's just like a perennial, like you're in your 20s, have a cigarette, enjoy it while you can, and then it'll go away. And it did.
Yeah.
I have no
Interesting.
desires. I miss it, but I have no desires now.